the continent, celebrating Africa Day today. It marks the founding of the African Union and the quest for unity. In fact, we've got various events that are lined up across the continent.
So our reporter Ziyanda Ngcobo is in Guinea for us this morning, where former President Thabo Mbeki will be the main speaker at his annual lecture this year. This will be the first time in its 13 years that it's held outside of South Africa. Hugo Ribatika is in Arusha in Tanzania. That's where the Festival of Arts and Culture enters day 4. And Ekeomah Atuonwu will join us from Nigeria's capital, Abuja, to tell us about how Nigerians celebrate Africa Day. All right, Hugo, let's kick off our coverage with you this morning. Tell us more about what we can expect with the Festival of the Arts and Culture. Day 4 today, you're in Tanzania.
Good morning, Michelle. It is indeed day 4, and today is about tree planting. Festival of the Arts and Culture enters that 4th day, and what they're going to do today is go around the city of Arusha planting trees, 1,000 trees. And all of this is a part of the legacy of the festival, which began in the early 1960s, Michelle. And it didn't happen for a number of years until last year when they had the first part of that return, which was held in Zanzibar successfully. So this is the 2nd year on the trot that they're having it in Arusha, Tanzania. Now, just to give you some insight into what's transpired over the last few days, the event was kicked off with a keynote address by renowned Professor Pierlo Lumumba. And those conversations, as per usual, were expected to, in fact, talked about issues around democracy on the African continent and how Africa can empower itself. One of the key conversations was the necessary move for Africa to move away from being a consumptive state to a productive state. With 67% of Africa's population being young people, there is a perceived notion that a huge amount of consumption is occurring on the African continent, but all of this is being imported from across the globe. Now, that conversation shifted to what can the rest of the world do for women on the African continent. I spoke to a number of speakers from the United States who have come to Africa for the very first time. And all of this on the back of recent visits by Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States, to Africa. So those engagements that are currently taking place as the United States and certainly parts of the West are coming to Africa looking to engage women. So that was the first part of the festival. Now, come today, obviously, tree planting. Over the next 2 days, it turns to sport, and obviously speaking to young people. So an opportunity for young people to engage in various sporting activities. Football is high on the agenda. Bundesliga officials have come out to Arusha, Tanzania, and they'll be conducting coaching clinics, teaching young people how to play football, and obviously speaking to a number of coaches. There's also a Pro-Am golf tournament happening over 3 days. So a lot to look forward to on the last remaining days of what's happening out here in Arusha, Tanzania. But also let's find out what's happening from Guinea Conakry with Ziyanda Ngcobo. Ziyanda, very good morning to you.
Well, Hugo, we're here in Guinea Conakry, where former President Thabo Mbeki will, of course, be leading those Africa Day commemorations. He'll be having his Mbeki lecture for the first time outside of the country, that being South Africa. And it's an important fate for the Thabo Mbeki Foundation because they've basically heeded a challenge by other African countries who'd somewhat criticized the foundation for always commemorating Africa Day in South Africa, and yet it's a continental moment. You'll know that it's the 60th anniversary since the formation of the Organization of African Unity, which is now the African Union. So today there'll be a briefing with Mbeki, who will be flanked by his main speaker for that Mbeki lecture this Saturday. That's Prof. Siva Grovongai, and he's a West African professor who's contributed a lot to this part of the country. And one thing we'll also be looking forward to is having that one-on-one conversation with the patron of the foundation. Of course, there are plenty issues, including those of the country that we're broadcasting from. It's currently under a military rule after a coup in October 2021. And so there's still efforts to get a democratic government in place, but it would seem that at this stage the situation remains tense, and it is a war-torn country, resembling many African countries on the continent, of course, whether you're looking at the situation in Sudan, I should say, or whether you're talking about the ongoing conflict in Tigray, Ethiopia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, in the Great Lakes region. There are plenty of conflicts on the continent that are worth reflecting on when you look at the values that the African Union espouses. The theme for this year, of course, being that of accelerating the African continental free trade area. And we know that even in South Africa, there have been conferences from a business perspective to talk about how to create the single market and how to really integrate, all these countries so that the 1.3 billion African citizens on this continent are able to access goods, and it would obviously compete then with numerous countries. So those are some of the issues we're looking to touch on. Of course, back home, we're all looking closely at that BRICS summit where we're anticipating the arrival of Russian President Vladimir Putin, and whether or not the South African government will enact on its commitment to the International Criminal Court as it has signed that Rome Statute. You'll know there's a warrant of arrest issued for him. So we're hoping that also the patron will be able to talk about that vis-a-vis what the African continent says about justice and what it looks like for African leaders. Let's now take you to Abuja in Nigeria, where my colleague Ekeomah will also be talking about what she has in store for the commemorations in that part of the continent.
Okay, so I'm at the African University of Science and Technology, where the Center for Peace and Pan-African Studies is holding a lecture to talk about Afrocentric landscapes of architecture. But then Nigeria does not really celebrate Africa Day as such, especially because right now in a few days' time there's going to be a handover of a new administration. So it's quite not a major celebration. But here in the African University of Science and Technology, they're holding a lecture. So we're going to be having two guest lectures, two hosts giving us details of leadership and then the Afrocentric architecture. The Center for Peace and Strategic Studies of this university is a major research hub for the African University of Science and Technology.
All right, and there you have our colleagues there in various parts of the continent who are watching the story from various perspectives. Ziyanda Ngcobo, live to us there, Hugo Ribatika and Ekeomah Atuonwu. Once again, thanks very much indeed.